Kenny Anderson was one of the all-time greats. He spent his entire career with the Cincinnati Bengals. He even came back as a coach. He was an offensive coordinator. He went to Little Augustana College, was selected in the third round of the 1971 NFL Draft by the Bengals, 16 years. Now listen to this. He led the league in passer rating 4 times, completion percentage 3 times, passing yards twice. He's been an MVP. He's been the NFL Offensive Player of the Year. That's the year he led the Bengals to the Super Bowl. He set the all-time NFL record a year later for completion percentage in a season. He held that record for over 30 years before Drew Brees broke it back in 2009. He still holds all the Bengals franchise records for passing yards, attempts, and after his professional career is over, he's done a little bit of everything. We mentioned as a coach, he was a local TV sports anchor for years and years and years. He even coached for the Pittsburgh Steelers, for God's sakes, and won a Super Bowl ring with the Steelers. It is an honor and a pleasure to have not only one of the all-time greats at quarterback in the NFL, but one of the all-time Hall of Fame guys, and that's Kenny Anderson. Kenny, Hall of Fame ring with the Steelers. Are you wearing that thing around much at all, or is that just tucked away somewhere?
It's kind of just tucked away somewhere. It doesn't make many appearances here in Cincinnati. But I tell people, I get a lot of grief for that, but I wasn't the one that was, that left Cincinnati voluntarily when I was coaching. I was kind of asked to leave, and, you got to find work. And I was in Jacksonville for 4 years. And then, Jack Del Rio, and I guess the 6 years he was there, he fired 19 assistant coaches, and I lasted 4 years. I felt pretty good about that. And then had a chance to go to work with Mike Tomlin, in Cincinnati or in Pittsburgh. My connection there was Bruce Arians, who was the offensive coordinator. So it was, there are more similarities than dissimilarities between the Bengals and Steelers than you might think.
Really? What would be some of the similarities? Because the first thing, Kenny, that anybody would say is, the Steelers have a pile of Super Bowl trophies, and the Bengals are still in search of number 1.
Well, I would say the first thing that in 3 years with the Steelers, I never had a meal on a team plane. Before we left, to get on the plane in our waiting area in Pittsburgh, you would grab a deli sandwich and a bag of chips and a candy bar or something like that, and you would get a drink on the plane. And then after the game, before you got on the plane, and you walk on, there's a tray there with hamburgers or cheeseburger or hamburgers or chicken sandwiches. Which one do you want? And you would take that on the plane. So, everybody says sometimes the Bengals throw nickels around like manhole covers. And, I was like, the Steelers were not real thrifty as well.
I want to go back to you growing up in Batavia. What was life like in the Anderson household growing up in a town? That's a small little town.
No, it is. It was great. My graduating class in high school was 125. And so if you wanted to play sports, if you wanted to play basketball or wrestle, you had to go out for a fall sport, football or cross country. If you wanted to play baseball or run track in the spring, you had to go out for basketball or wrestling. If you wanted to play football or cross country in the fall, you had to go out for baseball or track in the spring. That was just, well, most of the coaches coach multiple sports anyway, but that was the way to keep the numbers up. And that was really a pleasure for me. I mean, we were outside all the time, playing, and I had the advantage that my backyard ran right into Dan Issel's backyard. All-American at UK, member of the NBA Hall of Fame right now. And, he played baseball, he played football as well. And, we're always out in the driveway shoveling snow if it was in the winter to play hoops. But I did have one big advantage, that my dad was the high school custodian. And if they had a game on a Friday night or Saturday night, he had to go in and clean the gym the next day. And man, a lot of times my friends, we would go down there while he's working. He'd go into the head coach's office and break out the rack of basketballs that the varsity used, and we'd play basketball all afternoon while he's working.
I was going to ask you about Dan Issel because when I was a kid and before my dad got the job with the Reds, he was announcing the old ABA, the American Basketball Association, and I was a ball boy for the visiting team. And the one most vivid memory that I have was playing the Kentucky Colonels, where Dan Issel played before the leagues merged, and he went to the NBA and a phenomenal career in Denver primarily. But I just remember he had no teeth, no front teeth. And back in those days, basketball players weren't wearing mouth guards like they are now. Did he have those knocked out? Do you remember back when you were in high school or something?
No, it was 7th or 8th grade, and we were practicing. I think it was during practice at McWayne Grade School. That's where, we the 7th and 8th grade teams practiced and played. And he got tripped, and he went down, and the first thing that hit was his mouth, and his front tooth, he stuck in the floor. So he hadn't had him ever since.
That's unbelievable. I've always wondered that. He was such a cool guy, and so was Louis Dampier, and Artis Gilmore was on that team. My kids went or are going to a public high school where it's 120 in a graduating class, so I get what you're talking about playing multiple sports. But you're still a small town, and frequently great athletes in those smaller schools can get overlooked. Were you recruited by bigger schools, or was there something about Augustana that you liked better than anywhere else?
Well, I was a little small in high school, where Dan was already 6'9", and he was being recruited by just about everybody in the country. So you had a lot of people there looking at you. Also, we had Dan was a year older than I was. We also had a baseball player named Byron Von Hoff, who was a year older than I was, and ended up being drafted very high by the New York Mets. And that was in the age of Seaver and Kuzma, all those young players for the young Miracle Mets. Well, Byron was in that group. Unfortunately, he missed spring training. He had to do his 6 months active duty for the Army Reserve. And then when he got back to spring training, the other guys were already up with the big league team. They tried to rush him through spring training, and he threw out his arm and really never played after that. So there were a lot of baseball scouts around. So I always thought baseball was probably my best sport. But, my driver's license at 16 said 5'5", 155. So a lot of guys weren't interested in that. So had a lot of schools like Augustana I could have gone to, but a lot of kids in my town went there. It was a Lutheran college. And so I felt very comfortable there. Went there to play basketball and baseball. And in June, before I went to college, my high school football coach says, Kenny, you ought to try out for the football team. And so I think the letter is dated June 29th that I wrote Ralph Steranko, the head coach, could I try out? And, at a Division III school in those days, they're looking for warm bodies, and there was no scholarship money. So I ended up making the football team. And by the second game of the year, I went in and I became the starting quarterback on the varsity after that. And then football season ended, and I was going there to play basketball. Now I'm a month late for basketball. I don't even get a practice uniform. So I'm playing on the freshman team. And, I'm dressing for the varsity, and we're in the Chicago area near my hometown. And one of the starting guards had 20 points in the first half. He did something to upset the coach, and he got benched the second half. He put me in. I had 20 the second half. From then on, we were the starting guards on the varsity. So I played 3 years of varsity basketball. And then the baseball coach said, and we're hitting in the bus barns. And at that time, I was a little tired, going 2 sports back to back and trying to study a little bit. So I never did play baseball. But I was a catcher, and I always told bench, I said, if I had played baseball, they may never heard of you.
When did you go through the growth spurt? I mean, because you were saying, your driver's license is saying in high school 5'5", whatever. You're a big, strong guy. When did that happen?
It started when I was in college. I think I went there at 6'1", and about 180, and then I got up to 6'2", and maybe it's because I discovered beer when I, about that time, and I put on some weight up to 215, and so now all of a sudden now, I've got the physical dimensions for an NFL quarterback, and got real lucky because my senior year, Pete Brown, Mike's brother, was the head of the scouting department. He was at a Notre Dame game one Saturday afternoon, and I was playing Valparaiso in Valparaiso, Indiana that night. So he went over to that game. So he was the first one that saw me play.
That's amazing. You get drafted in the third round in 71. You mentioned Pete Brown. Did you know who Paul Brown was?
Oh, heck yeah.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I grew up in the Chicago area, a big Bears fan, and, you know, Billy Wade was the first quarterback I really liked, and, you know, Rudy Bukic. And so, you know, you're following the NFL, and I was always a big football fan. So, yeah, I was very well aware of Paul Brown.
And, you know, when you come now, and we had Mike Reed on the program, we've had others on the program who, you know, their first experience with Paul Brown or the first time they met him, what kind of impression he made upon them. You recall that day?
Yeah, it was the draft in those days was in January, the end of January. And, you know, during the season, the Bengals coaches went out on Saturdays and scouted. And so Bill Walsh actually came up to Waukesha, Wisconsin, and saw me play against Carroll College. And then went after the game. He took a flight and got to Cleveland for the Bengals game the next day. So he had been there. Mike Brown had come out to Rock Island to watch me play. Right after the season, you know, Bill had come out to Rock Island to work me out in our old gym. And so, yeah, I was very well of the organization. And, you know, when I got down there, I was drafted on the first day, and they called me, and I caught a flight the next morning, went to Cincinnati, and, you know, the first thing to do was take me into Paul's office. And that was quite an intimidating experience.
What was intimidating about it?
Well, behind his desk, and, you know, I mean, there's pictures of him and Otto Graham and, you know, the success that he's had. And here's the new franchise the year before. Gosh, they won their last 7 games in a row, I think, to win the division, go to the playoffs for the first time. I think that the youngest NFL franchise to go to the playoffs. So there, and, you know, he had a tiger skin rug on the floor. And so, yeah, I was pretty impressed.
Yeah, I would imagine. Your quarterback coach, Bill Walsh. Now, look, guys, you know, when they go on to achieve bigger and better things, and someone make the argument, you know, that he's the greatest coach of all time or one of the greats, certainly. What was he like? What was it like being around him? He was a young guy, just like you were obviously a very young guy.
It was great. And they didn't have the rules then. And so I signed my first contract the night that I was there at 10 o'clock at night. Went in with Mike Brown to negotiate my contract, and they offered me a 3-year contract for $18,000, $20, and $22, and a $7,500 signing bonus. And I'm thinking, man, I like the 18. If I didn't make it, I had a teaching job lined up in Chicago with my uncle, who's my idol, teaching math and coaching high school football and basketball with him. And he said, Kenny, go ahead and take it. He said, you know, your starting teacher salary is $5,000. So for some reason, I said, you know, Mike, I want a $10,000 signing bonus. And he pulled out a check made out to me for $7,500 and said, this is what you're going to get. I said, fine, where do I sign? And he said, I tell you what, if you make the 40-man roster, we'll give you the extra $2,500. So I moved down to Cincinnati, you know, the beginning of February, and met 3 days a week with Bill. And literally, I didn't throw a football for a long time. It was just working on the drops, you know, where I would stand in place just to get the feel of moving my feet in a 3-step drop. Okay, now this is standing in place. I'm not going anywhere. It's 1, 2, 3, and cock your arm like you're going to throw, then a 5-step, then a 5 and a hitch. And then the next week we would walk back and do the same things. And he said, okay, now here's the route here. It's going to be 82 Z in, it's 5 on, you know, and we're talking about the offense at the same time. And it was the old 16 millimeter film. And he gave me a projector in my apartment and a stack of films. And he said, all right, take these home with you tonight and write down all the offensive formations. And I'd do that. And I'd go back, I'd take the stack of films, put them on his desk. And he said, okay, now take these back again with you and write every defensive front. So, I did that, and it was so helpful to me to have that one-on-one. And had I not gone to Cincinnati and had Bill Walsh to kind of take this piece of clay and mold it into whatever he wanted it to be, I wouldn't have made an NFL team. And by that September, I'd have been at New Trier High School coaching football and basketball and teaching math.
Your first year, you play in 7 games. Then you move on to become the starter a year later. 10-4. Eventually, you win the AFC title. You get to the playoffs. When people watch regular season football, Kenny, and then they watch postseason football, is there a difference between the two in terms of level of play and intensity?
Well, you think you're intense every game, but you go and my first playoff game was 1973 down in Miami when they had those great teams, and we were down there, and it was a cold week in Cincinnati, and Paul Brown always believed in sleeping in your own bed as much as you could, and so we practiced here all week, and we caught a flight to Miami on Saturday, got down there, and it's one of those mid-80 humid days in Miami, and that's when I realized that it's tougher going south at the end of the year than it is north. Going south, it was physical. I mean, you kind of hit the wall at certain points, and in that game we lost our top running back, Essex Johnson, and he went out in the first quarter. We got beat in a close game, down there, and so that was kind of my first experience with it. You're excited for it, and then a couple of years later in '75, we're 11-3, I believe, and there was only one wild card in those days, and the Steelers won the division at 12-2, and so we went out to play in Oakland. And of course, in those days, the dynasties were the Miami Dolphins, the Oakland Raiders, and the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think we got beat 31-28 out there. And I remember driving down to win the game at the end, and going to throw the ball, and got sacked by Ted Hendricks. And so then it was a while. It was kind of frustrating. Bill Walsh left after that year. Paul Brown retired and turned the team over to Bill Johnson as our head coach. And we played well in 76 and 77, and injuries kind of crop up. We weren't a very good team, and in 78 we were playing up our sixth exhibition game, and we're playing the Packers in Milwaukee, and we got a big lead at halftime, and I go out to start the second half, and in the first series I hit my hand on the helmet and broke my throwing hand and missed the first 4 weeks of the season. And we started off 0-4 and going out to play the 49ers, and a lot of rumors that they were going to fire Tiger, and I really loved him as a head coach, as a person. And I went in on Monday and told the doctor, cut the cast off, I'm playing. And so I was not real effective, and they fired him on the plane on the way home. And then 79 was an awful team for the Bengals, and of course, Forrest Gregg comes in 80, and you didn't have to worry about intensity for a playoff game because Forrest made sure you had intensity for every game.
You look at the. I want to back up just real quick because you were there. You worked very closely, as you just talked about, with Bill Walsh, and of course, people that are old enough to remember, they all walk around and they wonder what could have or what should have been. Being in the quarterback room with Walsh, you mentioned Tiger Johnson. Were you surprised Johnson got the job when Paul Brown stepped away and not Bill Walsh?
Not really, and I tell people, as much as I loved Bill, Tiger was a great coach. I mean, he was a great player as a center for the 49ers, and he was a great coach. And my feeling at that time was that he was more ready to be a head coach than Bill was. At that point, Bill was still a little, I thought, too close to the players. I mean, we had a great time with Bill. I mean, he might meet us out for a beer after the game, something like that. Of course, in hindsight, to see what happened, Bill went to the Chargers and then to Stanford and the 49ers, it probably would have been different had he stayed. But in that moment in time, I thought that Tiger Johnson was the correct choice.
All right, 81, the first game of the year. You throw a couple of interceptions in the season opener. You guys are down 21-0 against Seattle. Turk Schonert comes into the game, takes over for you at quarterback. Forrest Gregg pulls you as a starter at halftime. The team goes on to win the game. What happened that night, the following day, maybe a day or two later, between you and Forrest Gregg? Anything?
Well, yeah, a lot happened, and you're absolutely correct that Turk Schonert came in. Turk was our third string quarterback. In 1980, we drafted my replacement, Jack Thompson, the throwing Samoan, and he was hurt and he couldn't play. So Turk is the one that came into play, and I think leading up to that, it's everybody wanted Jack Thompson. I'd been hurt a lot in '79, and my career had kind of gone down a little bit. I knew we were going to be pretty good. We only ended up 6-10 in '80, but I knew we were going to be better. And then, but everybody's clamoring for Jack. So I just put too much pressure on myself. And, you can't play and try to be perfect. And that's what I did that first game. And I was awful. I deserved to be benched. In fact, I wish you would have pulled me earlier, saved me some misery. But, after the game, went back and, you're trying to console yourself and have a beer. And, a guy could say, hey, I just heard on the news that Turk's going to start next week. You're not going to start. And I go, what? And I called Lindy Infante, and I went down there, and he said, well, we're kind of thinking about it, but talked to Forrest, and we had a long talk, and he said, all right, meet me in here at 8:00 on Wednesday morning. So I go back, and on our off day, I get a call. They had a running back in town. They wanted to work out, and could I come down and throw to him? And I go, they don't have anybody else to do it. Maybe they just want me down there to see if I can still throw. And, I met with Forrest on Wednesday morning, and we went through a lot of different scenarios. Is it better if I start? Is it better if I come off the bench? If we need me? And then finally says, Kenny, what do you want to do? I said, I want to start. He said, okay, you're starting. So that's then I started thinking about it. Oh, geez, we're playing the Jets this week. It's the New York Sack Exchange. Gastineau, Klecko, Marty Lyons, Abdul Salam. Maybe I shouldn't be playing this game. But we went there, and I'm a little nervous anyway, and we're playing at the old Shea Stadium, and the U.S. Open tennis tournament is going on the same weekend. And our offensive line always went over early. They get a hotel van, and we get there, and we have no offensive line. And I go, oh, what the heck? And, we got the police out looking for them, and we go out to warm up. We still don't have an offensive line. The starters aren't there. Now I'm really getting nervous, and the van driver took in the Yankee Stadium rather than Shea Stadium. Now with traffic, they're struggling to get there, so they come out to warm up. They got to go in and get taped after warm-ups. And during the week that week, they're kind of joking with me. We get in a team, and the first pass I throw, hey, Kenny, which way are you going to throw so we can make the tackle after you throw an interception? So, go out for the first play, and I think, Lindy Infante was a great offensive coordinator. And, I thought, well, he'll let me get in the flow of the game, hand off a couple of times. Well, the first play's a pass. And so I get in the huddle, and I go, all right, you assholes. The first play is going to be a pass. It's going to be the right, just in case something bad happens, go make the tackle. And everybody had a chuckle, and we went on to win 31-30, I think, that game. Great game. And, of course, the rest is history. We ended up 12-4, winning the division.
Well, and you end up as a league MVP. I mean, that's one of the things that is just staggering. And now hearing after what happened halftime of that game, and you talking with Forrest and moving on to the Jets. But I mean, you said you're a nervous type, and here you are in New York. I mean, who would have ever thunk that year you go on and you win the MVP, you throw for over 3,700 yards, I think it was, 29 touchdowns, you lead the league, and ironically, touchdown to interception ratio. And here the Cincinnati Bengals are going to the Super Bowl, and you're the most valuable player in the league. Unbelievable stories.
Oh, yeah. No, it was a fun ride, and that was the first playoff game ever in Cincinnati that year. We played Buffalo, and was a great playoff game. I think we won at 28-21. And, you talk about a crowd making a difference. They had taken a timeout. They couldn't get a playoff, and then came back after the timeout. And this is when we had just scored to take the lead. And after timeout, they come out and still had to take a delay a game because of crowd noise. And they couldn't convert, and we win the game. So we owe the fans a big thanks for that one. And of course, next week, we go out, and the temperature got real cold for some reason. And it's 59 below with the wind chill. And guys, we're at the hotel the night before. Guys' cars won't start. They come down to the game. We're hitching rides any way that we can. And that was one of I think, you talk to the guys on that team, one of our proudest accomplishments that we could go out into conditions like that and perform. And, everybody said, well, it's unfair. Miami, or the Chargers had just played in Miami the week before. It's 80 and now it's minus 59, and that's not fair to them. And I said, you know what? We were out in San Diego earlier in the year and beat their ass. I mean, it wasn't close. And had they won that game, we'd have played the championship game in San Diego. So we earned that right. But, Tom, my favorite story about the championship game is they brought in heated benches that we had never seen before. And so it's in the first quarter, and I'm over. I go off the field, and luckily I've got my helmet on, and they got little slots for your feet to go in. And so I put my feet in there. I'm sitting on my hands. Somebody throws a cape over me, and a couple minutes later, there's a big roar. And I think, is there a turnover? Am I going back in the game? And so I stand up to see, and my feet don't come out, and I go down, and the first thing that hits is my face mask, and I'm seeing stars. And I'm calling for Marv Pollins, the trainer. I said, Marv, get some smelling salts, do something. I said, I can't get knocked out of the game falling off the bench. They didn't have as many cameras in those days, and there were no cell phones, so nobody caught it. But, in today's world, somebody would have seen it. They probably would have called down from the press box. They would have gone into concussion protocol and not finished the game.
I've only never heard that story. That's a great story. When walk me through, Kenny, because I was a senior in high school. And, I mean, when you're a senior in high school, there was nothing cooler than your team, hometown team, going to the Super Bowl. I mean, I can remember almost every single moment. Of that whole ride through the season and so forth. But walk me through being down in the third quarter. It's a 20-7 game. You get the ball inside the 5. You get the ball down to the 1. Now, much has been made of the inability to get into the end zone. And it's not Monday morning quarterbacking. I'm just kind of curious, what did you think of the play call? You got Big Pete Johnson down there, right, weighing 270 pounds, whatever he weighed. What are you thinking about as the plays are coming in, and this is the biggest moment of the game?
Well, I had no question about the play calls. I mean, we had been so successful, in short yardage and goal line. I mean, we had Pete. He might have been listed at 245, but he was probably 270. We had another big blocking back, Charlie Alexander. A great, we're talking about Munoz, Montoya, Lapham, Blair Bush, Mike Willis. We had a good offensive line. So, no, that was, no problems right there. I apologize for that.
That's all right.
But that was not what lost us the game. It was, the turnovers in the first half to put us down 20-0. We kicked off to San Francisco. They fumbled the opening kickoff. We got a great field position and got down to the 5-yard line. I threw an interception. We're trying to put 3 receivers to the left. We're going outside to pick for Isaac Curtis to come underneath, and Dwight Hicks makes the interception, and they go down to get the first score. And we were going to at least get a chip shot field goal from Jimmy Breach. And, that play haunted me for years until I saw Hicks at a celebrity golf tournament. He says, Kenny, I'm surprised you're talking to me. And I said, oh, that was a long time ago. I've forgotten that. Yeah, right. Well, he said, I want to tell you, I blew the coverage. I was in man coverage on Kreider on the slot. I should have gone with him to the corner. I stood there and was there for the interception, so I shouldn't have been there. So, we had that one, and then, we're moving the ball in the second quarter, and I hit Chris Collinsworth, down around the 10 for first down. He fumbled it. They recovered. Now it's, 14-0, and, they're kicking off, right before halftime. And they squib kick it, and we muff it. They recover it, getting a field goal. Kicking off again, do the same thing. We muff it. They get another field goal to put it in. So we kind of self-inflicted that game. And, I to this day, I will always believe that we were the better team, but we didn't play like it that day.
At the time of your retirement, Kenny, you had thrown for the 7th most passing yards in the history of the National Football League. 7th most. 5 of the 6 guys in front of you are all in the Hall of Fame. I mentioned you had led the NFL in quarterback rating 4 times, completion percentage 3 times, passing yards twice, 4 Pro Bowls, MVP of the league. Take your team to the Super Bowl. You're asked this question all the time, Kenny. And I mean, listen, I told the story earlier. You're old enough to remember. I worked alongside of Ron Santo, the former Cub, great third baseman.
Oh, yeah.
Who from a time as a child growing up, he was diagnosed with diabetes. As he got older, there were incredible repercussions from that disease. He ended up having both of his legs amputated, but he still kept going strong and working in the broadcast booth. He was my partner with the Cubs when I was there. I was there every year in the winter, Kenny, out in Arizona, when he would be waiting on the call from the Hall of Fame. And every single year, that call never came. And they didn't put him in until after he had died, which was just, it's criminal beyond description. I only bring all of this up because I knew him well enough, like he was a second father to me, to know that there were parts of him that were consumed by that vote. Are you consumed by the Hall of Fame?
No. Would it be great? Yeah. I'm a kid that grew up in a small town. And I made it out of Batavia. And, you think if you're an MVP of the National Football League, you're the biggest athlete to come out of that town. Well, I was always second fiddle to Dan Issel. So, I never played for the accolades. And, so everything that's happened in my career, playing, 16 years in one place, is, wow, that was fantastic. And Cincinnati was the perfect place for me. It was a city I felt very comfortable in, and, small enough that I wasn't, consumed by, I would probably, I'd gotten swallowed up if I had to go to New York or, but, so no, it came out. The only time I was disappointed is, the first time I was eligible and I got to the final 15 and they told me, be sitting by your phone at 2:00 this afternoon. And so I was, and the phone never rang. And that was a tough night. But other than that, and, I got to go in the Bengals first class in the Ring of Honor. I'm very proud about that. And, the Hall of Fame is great, but I'm a part of a more exclusive club, and that's the NFL Man of the Year. When I was selected in 1975, and there's only one of those selected every year. So that's a pretty exclusive club, and I'm very proud of that as well.
But Kenny, but I mean, in researching this interview, and, you hear it here in Cincinnati all the time, and I know you had moved away for a while, and now you're back, and our city is better for it that you and your family are back here, living here. But, you look at some of the guys, okay, and I look at the late Kenny Stabler as an example, okay? You throw far more touchdown passes than he does, far more yards than he does. People forget what a great runner you were. You ran for over 2,000 yards in your career. Okay, your touchdown, you may not have had as many touchdowns as, say, Dan Fouts, who's in the Hall of Fame, but they were throwing the ball 15 and 20 times more per game than you were. But your numbers are so similar to those two guys. Now, some might say that Stabler, and I think it for a long time, and the numbers and the names don't lie, that they kept guys out of the Hall of Fame or made them wait longer than some others because they didn't win a Super Bowl. Do you think that that's held true for you?
I think that's part of it. I think if you look, probably the only position that's judged by Super Bowl championships is the quarterback position. If you're a tackle, a linebacker, a defensive back, a running back, that's not one of the criteria. But I think for the voters, a lot of times it's, have you won a world's championship?
You don't go around promoting yourself. You're a good friend, and my good friend, David Kubicki, is one of many out there that are doing anything and everything they can. If someone wanted to write a letter, to call somebody on the phone, contact them via social media, who are the guys at this point in time that will decide whether or not you get to the Hall of Fame?
Well, there is a senior committee, and they're the ones that select the candidates. They get together, and they've upped it from, 1 a year to now 3 a year, where it'd be 2 former players and a contributor. And so I'm so excited. The first year they did this to Kenny Riley, a teammate that gets to go in. And I'm just so sorry that he's not the one that gets to walk up on the stage. It's got to be, his son. But so they make the decision and they select them. And it's now technically they still have to go through the vote of the whole committee. But I don't think I think it's only happened once where whoever the senior committee selected didn't get elected that first year.
Well, Kenny, everybody's rooting like heck for you. I mean, it is just beyond comprehension to me. And I don't say this because I'm a Cincinnatian and a Bengals fan, which admittedly I am. It's just mind-boggling to me. Shift gears to the Bengals today. Would you have ever imagined back in your playing days? And look, the whole town, I think for those of us who were old enough, truly old enough to remember, that first trip to the Super Bowl was mind-boggling in this town, the excitement. It was just incredible. First time the team had been there. We saw that again. Boomer Esiason and that group in '88, and then this group last year. But the whole town seems to have sort of shifted in its following of the Bengals. Would you have ever imagined it would be like it is now?
Oh, yeah. I know how great the fans are. And, you got to give them a reason to be excited. And certainly a lot of things in the 90s, the Bengals gave them no reason to be excited. But, we got this kid, this number 9 kid with Joe Burrow. I think he's going to be a pretty good player. They've got, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. They've got Joe Mixon. They got great weapons. And, they got a good defense. And they're just a likable bunch of guys. And, there's no egos on the team. The thing I love about this team is their selflessness, that they pull for each other. They know what it takes to win. And they're willing to pay the price to do the things that it takes to win and not complain about it. They like to be around each other. Classic example, in one game, Tyler Boyd at one time was the number 1 guy here. Well, now we got Jamar Chase, we got T. Higgins, and he goes kind of through the whole game and, no targets, touchdown. He wins the game. This is the kind of team that they have. And they got great leadership. And I'm just so proud of them. When Zach was hired, he talked about culture, creating the culture that he wanted in the locker room. And they don't win many games. Yeah, you take that culture stuff and you know what you can do with it. Well, all of a sudden, he, after 3 years, he gets the guys in the locker room, and we saw what happened last year. And I think that's going to continue for a long time.
If you have you met Joe Burrow?
I've only met him once since he was drafted. The COVID protocols were tough for me to get anywhere near the building. And so now I met him after one of the OTA practices and had a little talk with him. And, it was about 5 minutes, a great talk. And, I said, we got to spend some more time together. And he said, well, give me a call next time you're in town. Well, we were back in Cincinnati and or back in Hilton Head. And, we get back a couple times a year. During the football season, but I hope I could this off season. I get a chance to spend a little time with him. What a great guy!
Oh, there's no doubt. And much like you, grew up in a small little town, down in Athens, Ohio, and like you did in Batavia, Illinois. If he were to ask you, look, he has had just extraordinary success in a very short amount of time. His first year, he got hurt. He comes back. Next year, they're off to the Super Bowl, and here he is now, and trying to get him back there again. But when you have the kind of success he's having, you've had it, been a league MVP, taking your team to a Super Bowl. What might be something that you would share with him or somebody like him in moving forward in your career to make sure you do or don't do what?
Well, I would say just, make sure that you enjoy what you're doing, and kind of smell the roses. And during the season, it's kind of tough. And, he's a nose to the grindstone kind of guy in his preparation. But, make sure you enjoy the process. And actually, that's one of the great things about this team is that they do enjoy the process. And, I remember a couple weeks ago, Zach was talking, he said, I don't mind giving the guys a victory Monday because they're all going to be in here anyway. And Jesse Bates says, yeah, I showed up on Monday at 9:30. I'm the last guy in here. Everybody's in the training room getting treatment. Everybody's getting a lift in. Everybody's getting ready for the next week. And so, he's a well-grounded guy, and he doesn't play for the accolades. He doesn't play for the headlines. He plays to win and to win with his teammates. And I think that's what's going to sustain him.
Okay, you were a great quarterback. You were a quarterback's coach. You were an offensive coordinator in the National Football League for a number of years. The Bengals, after starting their offensive line, Kenny, the same 5 guys for the first 15 weeks of the season, in essence, their last 3 games, they have lost 3 of those starters, beginning with Collins, going with Kappa, and most recently Jonah Williams. There's a chance that they could be starting 3 new offensive linemen this Sunday in Buffalo. Put on your quarterback hat first. What are you thinking about now facing that possibility?
Well, I think the first thing I always talk about is protections, in the pass game. And, you got to try to help those guys when you can. And the big thing a quarterback can do is get the ball out quick when you throw the football, which Joe's done a tremendous job of, this year. And we saw, that when they're all in there the last night, it was tough to make a first down at the end of the game, against the Ravens. But I think this week they'll have a chance. And luckily, those guys have got experience. They've been with the team. Shapling's been, he started 33 games with Houston. I mean, he's got games under his belt. Identity, the same thing. Carmen Jackson. So, these guys will be ready. They got a great line coach. And this is not new game planning like this. I think last year, the second round of the playoffs, they went to Nashville and Joe got sacked 9 times. Yeah, and they still found a way to win the game. So I got a lot of faith in this coaching staff and designing a game plan that will help the line out as much as they can. I got faith that Joe's going to find a way to win. I got a faith in our defense to come up with big plays.
You recently moved back to Cincinnati. Why?
Well, I got to spend the first 13 years of my retirement down in Hilton Head, playing all the golf that I can. And, like I said, my youngest, most active years were down there riding bikes, going to the beach, had a great time. And, now all of a sudden, I've got 6 grandkids between the ages of 11 and 3. And, when I only see, my granddaughter plays competitive volleyball and I see one match a year. And I went a couple months ago and she's playing and she's serving. Where'd this rocket of a serve come? She's got a jump serve now at 11. And I said, how'd I miss that? I've got another grandson, that plays flag football. And, I think I can help him out a little bit with that. While others are playing, indoor soccer, basketball, just to be around that. And I said that the nice thing is now we're going to be up here full time. And everybody said, oh, God, you'll come back to this weather. Well, before I left, we had a nice little get together at our club down in Hilton Head. And all these people came up and said, Ken, anytime you want to come down, you can stay with us. I said, I'm wearing a wire. I have this all on tape. So when I call, I say, we're going to come down for a week. So, if we get where we need a little warm weather, I need a little more golf, we go back to Hilton Head for a week.
Well, Kenny, it's just great having you back in town. It's great having you on the program today. I can't thank you enough for making the time to join us here today. And I know one day you're going to get that call for the Hall of Fame, but I made the comment before you came on. You have just always been, whether it was your days as a player, I got to know you once you were in the media, if you will, back in your days as an anchor. You always treated people like $1 million, and for those of us who were so young and, might have been intimidated being around a Kenny Anderson, you always made everybody feel like they were on top of the world. So thank you for your time today, and thank you for being Kenny Anderson.
Well, and thank you for having me, Thom. And it's always a pleasure. And the reason I got out of the broadcast business is lack of talent. I think was the main reason. And a little story about broadcasting, if you've got time, that, I've been doing it. I had a call-in radio show on WKRC, and I did the morning sports with Jerry Thomas, which was the best job I've ever had, getting to work with him. Of course, my first sports report was at 5:30 in the morning, so it was some early mornings, and did a little TV reporting with Nick Clooney, and then Charlie Meacham was the head of Great American Broadcasting, and he said, Ken, I want you to be this. It took me and Jerry Thomas to Muirfield every year to play golf. And we're up there walking down the first hole, and he said, Ken, I really want you to be the sports anchor. And I said, Charlie, I don't know about that. I said, Don Burrow's a good friend of mine. And they said, well, Don's not going to be there anyway. I want you to do it. Well, how do you say no to the CEO? So this is, kind of in June, and I'm going to start it in August. And so kind of getting ready for it, and did a little bit. It was disaster when we started off, but I get a call from HBO, and that's when they had Inside the NFL with Nick Bonacani and Lenny Dawson. They wanted added a third person. And I go, this is great, And the news director would not let me do it. See, he didn't want his new anchor to be gone 2 nights a week to start it off. And so I didn't get a chance to even try that out. And had that worked out, I don't know where broadcasting would have gone, but I knew right then that being a sports anchor wasn't for me. And so I'd always wanted to coach anyway. And that's when I started to explore the options, and was luckily that Dave Shula gave me a chance for my first coaching job in the NFL.
Well, Kenny, we love having you back, man. And thanks again for your time today. And enjoy the game this weekend. Big-time game.
Well, we will. Let's talk again after the Bengals win the next 2, get ready for the Super Bowl. We'll come back and talk again.
You got it. That'd be awesome. That's a deal. Kenny, thanks for the time today.
Thanks, Thom.